It's 6 p.m. and I'd like to call the Planning Commission of August 7th for the City of Cathedral City to order. Can we have a roll call?
Commissioner McPhail?
Here.
Commissioner Mead? Here.
Present.
Vice Chair Malakoff?
Here.
Commissioner Lee?
Present. We sound very similar, Mead and Lee, up here, so if you can speak up a little
You
bit.
go in
that'd be good.
alphabetical order and then we'll.
No problem.
Sorry.
Let the record show all commissioners are present.
I'd like to congratulate Commissioner McPhail on his first meeting. Welcome, and we'll look forward to working with you. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Madam Secretary, do we have any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes to the agenda.
Okay, then we can get started with public comments. The public is invited to address the Planning Commission on any matter that's not on the agenda. If you wish to speak on the agenda item, please wait to be recognized. Except for special circumstances, the Brown Act prohibits us from responding or taking action on any comments made by the public unless it pertains to an item that's on the agenda. All speakers should give their name and city of residence and limit themselves to 3 minutes. Do we have any public comments for anything that's not on the agenda?
Do we have anyone in the audience wishing to speak on an item not on the agenda tonight? We have no one looking to speak.
Okay, so then we'll move on to approval of minutes. On the approval of minutes for the July 17th, 2024 meeting, are there any requests to speak on this item? Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? And if they're not, do we have a motion?
I move we accept.
Second.
You can click.
Oh, you have to hit the button.
Yes.
And the motion to approve the minutes passes unanimously.
Let the record show motion passes.
Our first item is a tentative parcel map 38903, the approval of a tentative parcel map to subdivide a developed 1.79 acre commercial plaza into 4 commercial parcels and 1 lettered lot within the MXC mixed-use commercial district within the city of Cathedral City. Mr. Roca, do we have a staff report?
Good evening. Yes, we do. Okay. Good evening, Commissioners, Vice Chair Malakoff. My name is Manuel Rocha, Assistant Planner here with the City of Cathedral City. Today I bring before you tentative parcel map number 38903, a proposal to subdivide an approximately 1.79 acre parcel into 4 commercial parcels and 1 common area parcel by the applicant, Alan Sanborn, on behalf of Sanborn Architecture Group. The project site is located at 68706 and 68718 East Palm Canyon Drive within the downtown area. The subject property is zoned mixed-use commercial with the general plan designation of downtown commercial. The project is surrounded by parcel zone MXC to the north, east, south, and west. Here are a few street view photos of the property. The project site is comprised of 3 multi-tenant commercial buildings and a standalone building with 1 tenant. There are no on- or off-site improvements proposed within this project. As mentioned, the applicant is proposing to subdivide an approximately 1.79 acre parcel into 4 commercial parcels and 1 common area parcel. The project proposes the following parcel sizes, as you can see in the table located on the PowerPoint. So this would be parcel 1, parcel 2, parcel 3, parcel 4, and parcel A, which is the common area parcel. The project is conditioned to provide CCNRs that provides for reciprocal access, parking maintenance, and trash reciprocal agreements between all the parcels. However, in order to make it clear that the common areas must also be included in the CCNRs, staff is requesting to modify condition of approval number 3.5 as follows. Prior to final parcel map approval, the applicant shall provide covenants, conditions, and restrictions that provides for reciprocal vehicle ingress and egress, parking access to common facilities such as trash enclosures, and maintenance over the newly created parcels, including common areas. The CCNR shall be reviewed and approved by the city prior to recordation. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission finds the project is exempt from CEQA pursuant to Section 5061B3 and Section 5315, Class 15, and provide TPM number 38903, subject to the attached conditions of approval and based on the findings contained in the staff report in addition to the requested changes. That concludes my presentation, and I am available for any questions. The applicant and the property owner are also here in attendance in case you guys do have questions for them.
Thank you, Mr. Rocha. Commissioner McPhail, do you have any questions?
Just a couple, and forgive me if these are very newbie and rookie questions as a newbie here. Just out of interest, it may not even be necessary, do we know the rationale for taking the step now of subdividing this from 1 big parcel into 4, since it's already developed?
Yeah, an explanation that the applicant gave to me was that they're just looking to divide these parcels into their own individual parcels in case there is an interest in future sale of each parcel individually. And also, it also provides them with different financing options.
And as a general question for the packets that we get, the conditions of approval, I read them and they seem relatively boilerplate. And I was just wondering, in this particular one, were there any specific and special ones that we should be aware of?
No, not necessarily. In fact, there are actually a reduced amount of conditions of approval, and that's just because the site is already developed.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Mead?
He asked my question, so I'm all good.
Okay, Commissioner Lee?
Just to confirm that this change doesn't affect any of the tenants in those properties.
That is correct.
Okay.
Could you go back to the page that showed condition 3.5? So 3.5 now will, thank you for including the mutual parking agreement and the mutual access in that. And will that also cover the mutual maintenance of the common lot A?
Yes, correct. So the addition that we are adding to this condition number 3.5 is that it includes the common areas.
Okay, good. So we want to make sure that, you know, that common area doesn't get ignored. So that's, you have a question?
Yeah, so I do have another question based on that. So if that common area is essentially its own parcel, does that mean they could sell all of the common area as one parcel and someone could come in and just develop all the common area?
Not necessarily, because there are still development standards that need to be
Okay.
met.
Thank you.
Yes, I'd like to add some. Let me interrupt you, Manny. Just to let you know, when we look at the CCNRs, if they're strong enough with all the language for all those items, we don't need separate covenants. The CCNR covers it. So we actually have 2 ways of getting it. If the CCNRs don't address it and they're not willing to put it in there, we will make them record a separate covenant on each one of the parcels.
And this is a public hearing, so I will open up the public hearing for comments from any members of the public that wish to speak on this. Do we have anyone that would like to speak on this public hearing?
It appears we have no one wishing to speak.
Thank you. So if there's no further comments, I'll close the public hearing. And do we have any discussion before we have a motion? Is there any other questions or discussion among the commissioners?
No.
Then do I have a motion?
I'll move. I move that we adopt a notice of exemption, finding the project exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, (CEQA), pursuant to Section 15061B3 of the state CEQA guidelines and Section 15315, Class Number 15, minor and land divisions, and approve tentative parcel map number 38903, subject to the attached conditions of approval and based on the findings contained in the staff report.
Do I have a second? And
Oh, wait a minute. I needed to amend that to
Yes.
include 3.5 as amended.
Yes.
So,
Okay, so then we will amend the motion, and does the seconder agree to the motion?
Yes, I do.
Okay, then we can vote on the motion.
Vice Chair, are you having an issue voting?
I'm trying. I think I need Justin to do something on my
If you
computer.
want to verbally declare your vote, we can mark it in our voting registry.
Well, I vote to approve it.
Okay, so like aye, and then close vote. Okay, so let the record show a motion was made by Commissioner Lee, seconded by Commissioner Mead. Motion carries all ayes.
Okay, on the next item, before it's announced, I have a conflict of interest, so I will need to recuse myself and leave the council chamber.
Commissioner Lee will be taking over for this item.
okay. So we're moving on to item 3B on the agenda. Consideration of a specific plan amendment 99-58A and design review 23-003 to amend the Uptown Village specific plan to create a new planning unit number 4 within a 7.16 acre area of the specific plan and provide corresponding development standards for build out of planning unit 4, and design review 23-003 to develop a mix of commercial uses including self-storage and future restaurants and retail uses on the 7.16 acre planning unit 4 site. Our recommendation, I don't need to read the recommendation right now, do I? No, okay. Can we please have a staff report?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Lee, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Sandra Molina. I'm the Deputy Director for the Community and Economic Development Department. Present for this evening's meeting, in addition to our staff and city attorney, the applicant is present, as well as the applicant's representative from Altum Group and Rob Bernheimer, and also his traffic engineer is present. So as indicated by Commissioner Lee, this is a proposal for a specific plan amendment to the Uptown Village specific plan to establish a new planning unit 4 and the accompanying development standards. The proposal would also allow for an administrative design review of subsequent development. The design review, as indicated, also is for phase 1, and we'll talk about the phasing of the project in a bit, but for phase 1 of the project, which is the 115,000 square foot personal storage facility use, a 4,700 square foot retail building, and then of course the related site improvements to support that development. So the project site and this, the graphic is rotated, so north is to the right, but the project is at the northeast corner of McCallum Way and Date Palm Drive. And the yellow area depicts the boundaries of the Uptown Village specific plan area. Properties to the north and the west are zoned planned community commercial. To the right, you have single-family residential. And within the project site itself, currently, the way the specific plan is adopted, it has 3 planning areas, and those planning areas are single-family, multifamily, and then the PCC zone district. And as you can tell by this aerial, the Uptown Village specific plan is developed except for the portion that is under discussion this evening. I will also add that the city also has an application under review for the north of Rosemont, which is for a 204 dwelling units. And then we anticipate in the future some development on the west side of Date Palm Drive. So this exhibit is from the adopted specific plan, and it shows the 3 planning units as they exist currently, and it also shows the commercial area. So one thing I will say about the Uptown Village specific plan, to give some background, the specific plan, this is was adopted in 1996 according to the exhibit here, but there have been amendments since then in 1999 and then one in the early 2000s. But the Uptown Village specific plan, it similar to our zoning code update and our design review update of our general citywide design guidelines. They're from the 1990s, 1980s, and so just like we're looking at updating those documents to provide some more flexibility for development, to look at some more modern design standards and perhaps even more modern uses, the specific plan is also in the same condition, so to speak, in that it reflects 1995 standards. And so the proposal for the specific plan amendment is timely and does propose to provide some modernization with respect to development standards, architecture, signage, uses. And so that's part of the proposal. This is the exhibit from the specific plan. You'll see Planning Unit 4, which is the new unit that's being proposed on the 7 acres. And again, everything else is constructed and developed within the specific plan area. The amendment itself, in addition to the Planning Unit 4, establishes allowable uses, both permitted and conditionally permitted. The way it's written, though, the majority of uses are principally permitted, and we've limited the type of conditional uses that would be allowed. The specific plan also establishes development standards such as setbacks, parking requirements, lot coverage requirements, architectural standards, which has materials that harmonize with and enhance surrounding architecture. There's also diversity in the architectural materials and the visual interest. Again, future flexibility for developers in the future to design projects. There's also a master sign program that's proposed within Planning Unit 4. And then again, the intent is to have the specific plan amendment Development Unit 4 through its standards provide for administrative design review so that with subsequent and future phases, provided that those developments are consistent with the specific plan standards, the permitted uses, and all the other requirements, then it would be subject to an administrative review to also provide and facilitate for future development. The one thing you'll see, and you saw that in the specific plan amendment, is that the build-out of Planning Unit 4 has 2 different development scenarios. And the reasoning behind those 2 development scenarios is that at one point we did have a potential user of about a 50,000 square foot building. And so we worked with the applicant to provide the 2 scenarios, and under the California Environmental Quality Act, the environmental review did consider both scenarios, but analyzed potential impacts related to the most intense of those two scenarios, which is the scenario 2. So what that means is that when subsequent development comes in, all that analysis has already been done, again, facilitating future development. So scenario 1 has the proposed mini storage facility, the 2 drive-through restaurants, 3 retail buildings, and again, the associated site improvements, parking, landscaping, trash enclosures, things of that nature, and also provides for a monument sign at the entrance. This development scenario, if it were to develop at as fully planned, would allow up to 133,243 square feet. Now, scenario 2, again, contains the mini storage facility at 115,000 square feet. It also has a single standalone retail use, a retail pad, and then it has the ability for a big box use or grocery store to come in, and that's at about 50,000 square feet. And again, all the associated ancillary improvements to support the project. So those are the 2 scenarios under the specific plan amendment. But with respect to development and the actual construction that's being proposed, there is the overall site plan which shows phase 1, which is the mini storage facility, and then the standalone retail business, and then phase 2. Phase 2 hasn't been developed yet, but we know that when it does come in, it has to comply with the specific plan amendment standards. The other thing, what we've done is when we've conditioned the project, and John worked really deeply on this, is that conditions are written for phase 1 and for phase 2, because phase 2 is going to trigger some off-site street improvements, which John will talk about a little bit later in this presentation. But what we did was to facilitate, again, that future development and streamline that process. We have conditioned the project to what those requirements are going to be for phase 1 and what those requirements are going to be for phase 2. So now here's the phase 1. And so we have the storage facility, which does have a small component of retail and office use, and then we have the future phase 1B, if you will, retail pad. This development also will have a, if you may recall, the aerial showed, let's see if I can use the mouse here. So this is McCallum Way. There's an existing entrance here. This driveway leads to the multifamily use. This leads to the existing commercial uses. So this will be improved and developed as the main drive aisle. This will come out to Date Palm Drive. All of this will be constructed as well. Street frontage improvements and the landscaping will be constructed as part of this design review. And these infrastructure improvements will be required for phase 1. So then there's also the architectural elevations that are proposed for the storage unit. Now, the Planning Commission packet did have the architectural elevations that were from the previous revision, so they were dated. Via separate email, we did send to the Planning Commission the most current updated elevations. And so the self-storage facility will be 2-story. It's a primarily interior climate-controlled storage facility. The overall height to the parapet will be 32 feet, but the height to the second-story roof plate is 25 feet. And so what you can see here is that the applicant's representative have designed this to incorporate varying roof lines, different materials. You have some ironwork, you have some textured block. You also have some variation with respect to the windows and these treatments here. These windows that you see up on the second story here, those are the stairwells. And then this is the rear elevation that shows some roll-up doors. It also has the silhouette of a mountainscape. And then you have the south elevation, which faces McCallum. These are some perspectives. These were also provided in the packet, showing the building and also with the parking and landscaping improvements. Again, you can see the variation in the wall planes, the roof lines, and also with respect to the different types of material treatments. This was also included, provides the colors of the building, the metal canopies, the rock texture, some perforated metal panels that are proposed to be used. And so That's also included. Now, the specific plan also contains, like we talked about, standards for development. So it does have some provisions for building form and massing, including, like we just talked about with the storage facility, variation in roof lines, architectural massing and forms, materials and color changing, roof lines, overhangs. So these are all standards within the specific plan, as well as standards for open spaces and shade, facade articulation, and pedestrian pathways. Now going back to phase one, there is a conceptual landscape plan. You can see there's quite a bit of landscaping proposed along the perimeters of the project site, as well as within the parking lot as well. There are conditions of approval that staff incorporated, that this main entrance needs to also have a decorative entrance, similar to what you see to the south here with the existing Dollar Tree and the Bacon building here. And then also what's proposed is to landscape and enhance this corner. We put a condition to also enhance this corner on the north side so that it looks like a completed entry statement. These are from the specific plan that show landscaping along Date Palm Drive using palm trees and Palo Verde trees. There's also these low screen walls to help screen vehicles. Then this is showing from a further perspective, from the street, you have the storage facility in the background. This is the entrance that when it's fully developed, that main entrance coming off of Date Palm Drive will be fully landscaped. Here's the streetscape looking at that main drive aisle. And again, so Rosemont, which is to the north of the site, will be improved. The developer with phase two is required to do their share of the improvements. And when the project to the north comes in, then that street will be completed, and John will talk about that a little bit more. And then this is the entry landscaping for Rosemont. The specific plan also provides a sign program within the document, and so when development comes in the future, it will need to comply with the standards that are also in the specific plan for that sign program. Now, in the packet was a set of conditions of approval for the project, and we have reviewed them with the applicant. Based on that discussion, a revised set was provided to the commission. We did have some minor planning revisions. There was some numerous changes to the engineering conditions. At some point when the commission has concluded their public hearing and is ready to move forward, we would recommend that if there's an action to approve it, that the revised conditions be part of that action. Now, what I'm going to do here is pass this over to John so that he can go through some engineering conditions.
Commissioners, good evening. Okay, so if you read the engineering conditions of approval once, you're a better person than me because it takes about 3 times because there's a lot of moving parts on here. So what this is all prefacing is we did a lot of, how should I say, updates and clarifications to the conditions, but substantially none of the content changed. We just worked with the applicant to make it clearer. So all these red lines you see are just making everything clearer, and I can explain it to you in here and what we're trying to achieve, because we came into if this happens first or if this happens first, because we're essentially working with what the future is and the potential for 3 parties to share in. Really, the big thing is there's a traffic signal intersection plan for Rosemount and Date Palm Drive. So this is the area, and you saw on the blank slide, this is the area, so this is going to develop. So you have Rosemont Storage, which is the design review you're seeing with the physical storage and the small office building on there as phase 1. Phase 2, we are conditioning for all the public works improvements so that it kind of gets the conditions of approval process out of the way. And then when they come back with their individual parcels, to put something on it, it'll be a design review, and you'd be reviewing those basically go through the architectural review committee and then the design on the development itself. But it'll already have underlying conditions of approval, and the environmental, as Sandra said, has already been completed. So we're being very forward thinking about this. So this project involves the touching of an additional project that we have an actual application in. You'll probably be seeing this in the next couple months, and that is the project known as the Wren, which has 400 plus for rent units in there. So that's a significant development there. And then we also have at least the initial request for reviews on a grocery shopping center across the street, which is very large, and that includes a lot of ancillary stores, storefronts, and flex spaces for additional businesses in there. So the crux of all this comes down to, we have an intersection here, and how do we make it so that there's an apportioned fair share amongst all these abutting developments to participate in that traffic signal? Well, the one thing all the developers got right off the bat, I will tell you, and George is here, Rosemount Storage traffic engineer is also the traffic engineer for the Wren, is also the traffic engineer for the grocery shopping center. So all the data and information, obviously the ancillary developments to Rosemount Storage benefit from him having that information consistent. He already pulled it. All the information's the same. One of the main goals of this was not only to look at the traffic impacts in the area, but also to figure out the apportioned fair share contribution to building this intersection. And so to build this intersection, there's a lot of ways you could do a fair share. In this case, we've told every developer right off the bat, if you're the first one in here, you're building the traffic signal. Everyone else will contribute its fair share once you have the cost, or if they come in during your construction, you figure out an agreement that you can work together on. So the first thing is Rosemount Storage and the Wren have a commonality where they have a 50% sharing participation with each other. One is, if you see the longitudinal oval along Date Palm Drive going north-south, considering north at the top of your screen, that is a 275-foot deceleration lane to move cars into Rosemont Avenue. The deceleration lane will accommodate going into the northmost major driveway of Rosemount, the north part, phase 2 of Rosemount project, and also the main driveway for the Wren project, which is all about this area. And in our initial designs, that portion of the street is 10 feet wider, and then as it gets to the end toward the residential neighborhood, it actually compresses down to a normal residential street. So in addition to that, all the construction on Rosemont Avenue to complete it is a 50% share. Whoever goes in first has to do some additional paving on the north side to make two-way traffic, and then the other person would come finish it off, but they would reimburse the person from everything north of the center line or south of the center line of improvements that they didn't do and the other party did.
So, before we get too far into this, because there's a lot of detail here, so the proposal is that the Rosemont road will essentially cross over Date Palm. Is that the idea, that
No.
that's going to be a four-way traffic light?
It'll be a four-way, but it'll go into a main driveway for the commercial center. So on the other side, you have Vega that comes through, and it had never been contemplated to go through that project. Whereas Rosemount had been contemplated because the curb and gutter is already extended there. Rosemount is very similar to our Vega Road. This continues. If you went all the way straight from Vega on the other side, you'd be at the Salvation Army and the Veterans Village.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand, once all is done, will you be able to cross directly to the shopping centre?
Yes.
Okay, so that will go, to my mind, it's a four-way,
Yes.
yes.
But you're asking, is it going to cross Date Palm?
It will cross State Farm. It'll provide protective movements left and right on Date Palm in all four directions.
But can you go straight across Date Palm?
Yes.
You can, okay, because that's not on this drawing here.
No, we didn't show
Okay.
that, but the median, if you look in your conditions of approval, this is what we call the Rosemont Storage Wren Cooperation.
Got it, okay.
That's where they're going to have to get together and do the cost and share that. Then you have,
Sorry, John, you mentioned also there'll be a deceleration lane, so that will be part of the Phase 2 land. It won't be part of Date Palm. Will it be a separate lane, that deceleration?
yes,
And that will create a right turn onto Rosemont?
yes. Good questions.
Okay. All right.
So, and that is triggered by Phase 2, the northern portion.
And sort of, I heard different things, so I just want to get it clear. When phase 2, for example, if Phase 2 goes first and Wren comes second, Phase 2 development will include essentially the whole structure of Rosemont, and then there will be an agreement with Wren to pay part of that cost.
Yes.
Is that correct? It's not that they're going to build one side and, Wren's going to build one side and
No, they're going to, the way it's designed is let's say, those are good questions. Phase 2 build is there first. They're going to build Rosemount all the way to the other side, minus 2 feet. So it allows full flow lanes, but it allows, when the Wren comes in, to put the curb, gutter, and sidewalk in on their frontage.
okay, but the light would be in.
The traffic signals, a different agreement here, so let's get to that. You ready?
Maybe. Okay.
Okay. Oh, there we go. I had passed up. So, you have the intersection. We call it the intersection. I preface it because it's referenced and it's in your conditions of approval. That intersection involves 3 parties. You have a share with Rosemont Storage, and so Rosemont Storage on that intersection, as determined by the traffic engineer due to traffic volume, ADT, due to the uses, you would have the Rosemont Storage, what we're calling the Rosemont Storage area, 16.29%. So if you have $100, they're paying $16 of it. The Wren is required to pay 13%. So out of $100 that the total cost would be, it's not. It's a significant amount of cost for this intersection, but using numbers everyone can understand, it's $13. And then when the grocery shopping center comes in here, they would be paying 70%, and that's due to the high volume use of not only the grocery enterprise that's proposed, but all the ancillary buildings that would be there. Kind of like when a Costco goes into a center, all of a sudden you have all the other flex stores coming in with all their other businesses. So that would be the apportioned share. So what happens is, if Phase 2 of Rosemont Storage goes first, they're going to build the shopping center. They're also going to build the deceleration lane and Rosemount. They will obviously have an accounting of how much it costs to do all this. We will know the cost because we have to secure bonds and have the work protected by bonds, so if they fail to complete, we can complete it because it's in a public roadway. What happens on the site, if they fail to complete, that's not our issue. Doesn't harm anyone, but on the streets, we require bonding to make sure that it gets completed. So we'll know the cost of what that took, and with that, every other applicant there will at least know what their fair share portion would be. And when they get their conditions of approval, the REN, let's say in 2 months, it'll almost be a flip-flop of what Rosemount Storage did or has its conditions of a if and when and who goes first, because we can't control the timing of how these developers operate. And then finally, when the venture comes in on the other side of the street, whether it's now or later, we'll at least have that apportioned cost as a participation on that, for that property, on that signal.
So is it like the paving, though, where the first person there is going to build the traffic signal and then get reimbursed? Or is it that the traffic signal won't go in until all the last of the 3 developments is built?
No, the way the agreement's written, the first person,
They will do the
like phase
traffic
2
signal.
goes first, they're triggering the
Got
traffic
it.
signals.
Okay.
So if the REN goes first, they're building a traffic signal. If the enterprise across the street goes first, they're building a traffic signal.
Got it.
So it's all outlined, and they all shouldn't have a challenge with the apportioned fair share because they're all using the same traffic engineer, which was beyond wisdom that we could believe, but it was a smart move by all parties. So in the conditions of approval, and I'll pass it to Sandra in a minute, but in the conditions of approval, it's basically that in a nutshell. A lot of, if they go first, this person pays this person. If this person goes first, if they're, you saw the old version, we all digested it and looked at it and came together, developer and ourselves, and really worked at wordsmithing because it was quite interesting, right, Stephanie? So we wordsmithed this so it's at least clear and we're all in agreement that the words mean what they say they are and everyone knows what they're doing.
I have one other question, which is about traffic, so maybe you can just answer that while you're there. So you mentioned the deceleration lane to Rosemont, and I thought our general idea was that for our main arterial roads, we weren't going to have any more entrances on the arterial road. It would be either through an existing parking lot or it would be from a side road. But what we've got with the storage facility is we're adding another entrance directly off Day Palm. Are you going to have a deceleration lane there as well?
No, we did have one there, but it became of which deceleration lane do we want more? And it was the one at Rosemount because it serves both the Wren who needed one and Rosemount that needed one there. The ancillary smaller deceleration or the smaller driveway, we analyzed it. It's a storage building. The traffic was so minor. In fact, that's why they're not even included in the participation. The storage traffic, when you get down to the analysis, the participation was like 0.5%. And so it wasn't even worth including in there. So it's significantly less. Now, if they had that as their main entrance to the shopping center, we would have done that. But they've agreed to put their main entrance for their northern portion off of Rosemount.
Okay, thank you.
Want to finish? You want to clean up, hit it?
So, I just want to show you really quick because it may be helpful as well. And I appreciate John going through that discussion because it's, the street improvements are really important, of course. But when you look at this particular exhibit, you can see the deceleration lane that John was discussing. So phase 2 will do it. Phase 1 will do its frontage improvements. Phase 2, when it comes in, is going to have its frontage improvements. You can see the deceleration lane, and then there's Rosemont. And Rosemont does then provide through access to Date Palm. The other thing that, with regard to Commissioner Lee's question about this drive entrance here, the original specific plan also identified this as an access point, so it's consistent with regard to the access points. So I did also, probably should have gone over this in the beginning. So, the commission is conducting their public hearing on the proposed specific plan amendment and design review. Now, the specific plan amendment is a legislative act, meaning the Planning Commission would make a recommendation to our City Council. Our City Council will also hold a public hearing, and that will be noticed, and so we'll notice in the same fashion with mailouts and publishing in the paper. And so I wanted to add that for the purpose of the members of the public that are here today, so they also know that there's a subsequent hearing that would also have to occur, with the council being the final review authority on the project. There was an environmental initial study and mitigated negative declaration prepared for the project under the California Environmental Quality Act. This was included in the packet as well. The notice of intent to adopt the mitigated negative declaration was sent out as a notice with a public review period of 20 days, and we did receive comments. And the comments that were received were included in the packet as a response to the comments, and so we had a letter from Fish and Wildlife. They haven't been fishing game for years. Fish and Wildlife, County of Riverside Flood Control District, a resident of the adjacent neighborhood also commented. The property owner to the south commented, and the fifth comment was offhand, I can't remember, but it's in our packet. So we did have responses. Based on those comments we received, we did update the conditions of approval, specifically in relation to comments from the Department of Fish and Wildlife. So we do have the final environmental initial study that's in that packet the Commission received, does have those updated mitigation measures. Also, there's a mitigation monitoring and reporting plan, and that includes the most current mitigation measures. And so the environmental document did determine that there's a potentially significant impact related to biological resources, cultural resources, tribal cultural resources, and transportation and traffic, but they could be mitigated to levels of insignificance through the mitigation measures, which are, again, in the mitigation plan. Then a second public notice was provided, a minimum of 10 days for this public hearing this evening. Again, it was published, it was mailed. We did get 2 new comment letters, one from a resident that is provided to the Commission. It's on the dais prior to this meeting. And then again from the adjacent commercial landowner to the south, also provided a letter of some comments with regard to the project. That landowner is also present this evening. So with that, I would recommend, or staff recommends, that the Planning Commission conduct the public hearing, receive the testimony, and based upon the discussion in the testimony, the Commission may vote to adopt the resolution recommending City Council approval of the project, again, adopting the mitigated negative declaration, the ordinance, amending the SPA, and also approving the design review, based on the conditions, the revised conditions that are included, that was provided this early evening. And with that, myself, any other staff member are happy to respond to comments.
Thank you. Do any commissioners have questions for the staff? Commissioner McPhail?
I have a couple questions. So by approving the specific plan, we're just approving essentially the design guidelines, correct? Like if something comes in and is proposed for phase 2 later, there would still be potentially some sort of public hearing about those projects, correct?
So the specific plan would allow for an administrative design review process for development of future phases. And so it wouldn't come to the Planning Commission provided it complies with all those standards. A specific plan is it's basically a zoning document for the land within that area. And so Planet Unit 4, when you look at the specific plan amendment, it is very much like a zoning code. Exactly what needs to happen, what uses are allowed, what the standards are, how much parking, how much setbacks, landscaping, and also the uses. But what's written in that document is allowing for administrative design review of future development. And so administrative design review does not typically have notice.
Okay, so if we have concerns about the potential, the phase 2 options, we would want to bring those up now because they're not going to be, if they're not brought up now or considered now, they will never be considered again. Just confirming that's
Yes, this would be the opportunity, the commission.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I have a question about the uses. So there's this long list of things that seemingly could go into the retail. I see there's things like banking and financial services, medical, dental, and counseling. Does general office space fall into this list?
So in working with the applicant, one of the things we discussed with the Planning Unit 4 was to focus the permissible uses on those uses that would provide an economic benefit to the community. And so those uses that don't have a tax generation type of use, we limited those type of uses. And so you will see limited office uses.
Okay. I did read through the whole site plan packet and the conditions and everything, but I cannot remember, and it just came up, I just thought of it now. Is there required bike parking or electric car parking? Normally, I would not bring up bikes because it's so hot here, but since this is going to be so close to a neighborhood, if there was a grocery store or there was retail and people wanted to bike, I was trying to go through these documents while you were talking, but I didn't see anything about that.
I'm pretty sure I put something on bike racks in the conditions.
Okay, okay. Since the whole parcel includes an area that's already been developed, would this specific plan apply to that, the already developed space? If they decided to redevelop it, they would have to meet the new specific plan?
The specific plan amendment would only apply to the new planning unit 4.
Okay.
The existing development would fall back to the specific plan, the original specific plan document.
Okay, all right. Let's see. Was there any, I know that there was a lot of traffic studies done on the level of service for all the surrounding intersections. Was there any analysis, because I didn't see anything about potential impacts of traffic going through the neighborhood? Obviously, there's a benefit for people who live in the residential area behind it being able to cut out through Date Palm, but if you're going to potentially put in 2 drive-through fast food restaurants, was there anything done to look at what kind of traffic might then be getting driven through those neighborhoods to exit rather than coming out onto Date Palm?
So I will defer to either John or the traffic engineer that's present. But typically they look at identified intersections, but John can probably answer that. Okay. The other thing, Commissioner Mead, is that 3.7 of the conditions does have a requirement for bike racks.
Perfect. I was looking for it and I couldn't. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, you want to answer the question about the traffic?
Absolutely. Good evening.
Thank you so
Commissioner
much for
Mead,
being
members
here.
of the Planning Commission. We did actually conduct, George Gosen, I'm a traffic engineer on the project with the Integrated Engineering Group. We've conducted, as part of this effort, traffic impact analysis, exactly what you mentioned. We looked at the study area. We evaluated multiple intersections, the northern 30th Street and also McCollum. And we looked at what John explained about the intersection, the new intersection. We looked at it holistically, at a build-out of the community to make sure that we're accounting for all the traffic that might come in. And we did not come up with any impacts. So all the intersection, really the new intersection, the northern intersection, and the southern intersection are operating at a really good level of service.
Right, but those are the intersections that cross Date Palm. So what I'm saying is, did you look at any analysis of how many people are going to come out onto Rosemount and take a right and go into the residential area and cut through what is currently not a road? So that's...
Absolutely, and the only way you can do that is when you run the model. So what we've done, we ran the transportation model. We went through the county of Riverside. We accounted for because now we know the entire area, what's coming in across the street in the residential area and our project site. We ran the model, transportation model, to know exactly what is the turning movements, exactly what you're saying. The redirected traffic that's going to come from the neighborhood to the east, how many is going to make a right turn, how many trips from the northern portion where you're going to get to 30th going to be eliminated and use now the direct access to these facilities that we're going to build. So all of these were really modeled in order for us to kind of get the accurate picture as to how we're going to be able to really study the intersection, the auxiliary lanes, what is the length of the lanes that is needed, whether it's going to be coming into Rosemont or coming into the shopping center to the west. All of these were analyzed through the modeling effort.
Okay, is that part of the reason why the Rosemount narrows down to a more residential street? Is that to sort of ensure that it's not being used as more of a main thoroughfare as it gets into the neighborhood? That's at least what you mentioned, right?
Let me answer that. Well, you can't stop people from going where they want to be. That was the originally intent of the track. And bottom line, yes, it did not need the wider street as it did to get to those two driveway entrances. So I was just looking at the level of services, and they're all A and B, which are the best levels you can have. And the traffic signal actually mitigates the level of service on that. The signalized intersection at peak hours provides a level of service of C, which is actually really good in this city. So your delay is only 24 seconds. So in engineering talk, that's a good intersection, because we allow down to level D in this city.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for me?
Anything else? No.
We're good?
Commissioner, yes, Sandra, I think, probably. Commissioner McPhail?
In terms of what we're being asked to do this evening, I just wanted to check that, in the recommendation, we're being asked to approve the specific plan amendment, but also to specifically approve the phase one that you've shown as is, with the storage facility and also a retail space. That's correct. It's not just a conceptual scenario. We're actually being asked to approve that specific part tonight.
Correct, making a recommendation to the city council.
Yes.
For exactly what you described.
Okay. And I guess just continuing on from the questions we just had, there's a list of permitted, conditional, and prohibited uses, and the staff report says on phase 4 that all future development proposals are anticipated to be processed administratively by city staff. So just continuing on, so by approving this, a phase 2 proposal that involves any of the permitted uses on that list would not come back to us. It would be done administratively. So it could be a completely different configuration from the scenarios that we've seen, but as long as it's something on that list, we would not see that again.
Correct.
And I just have a little tangential question. Before it was explained to me, I was going to ask, what is REN? So now I know that REN is going to be a 400 or so?
If I can correct that, it's 204.
204.
Yes.
So it's going to be a 204 apartment development?
Correct.
Is that part of our housing element, or is this another?
That site was not in the housing element.
Okay. And this will be for another day, but something I did notice, because I've watched a few of the meetings before I sat up here, but you recently dealt with a cell tower issue, which is at the far northern end of the area that we're talking about. And I don't know if this will no doubt come up when REN comes up for approval, I imagine, but are there any rules about proximity of housing to cell towers? Because now we're going to be quite close, I think.
So our zoning code has very limited requirements or standards for commercial cell tower sites, and it's outdated and not consistent with the federal regulations for cell towers, which provides more flexibility with respect to distances from residential uses and such. And so, you'll see them closer than you would think.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I have a few questions, and as usual, some are probably more appropriate for the applicant, so you can just refer them over. I wanted to check just, first of all, how the notice of the public hearing was distributed, because Heritage Park is a rental facility. So would the residents there have received any notification of this hearing?
The notices are sent to the property owner, and so in that particular instance, it would have gone to the property owner.
Okay, so
Not the residents.
Yeah, chances are they don't know about that. I was wondering about the attendance by the public. Then I wonder if you can bring up your slide that was, I think, the landscaping slide, and the discussion of the access around the building. Yeah, so if we look at that, there's the route into Heritage Park, and then there's another road running along the east side of the proposed building. On the diagram, it looks like there are actually two gates, or there are two lines anyway, controlling access from the Heritage side. Is that correct? Or what are they otherwise?
Heritage, the multifamily does, I believe it does have a gate.
Yeah, it appears to have two gates
Yes.
there, and I didn't know what the purpose was.
Front access gate from McCallum.
From McCallum?
That's
Yeah.
how that's the main access. The second gate, which comes through where you see the self-storage project on here, the north side of it, that's an actual easement to that development for their emergency access. So that gate that you see has a Knox box on it to allow fire department and emergency responders to be able to get in there if the front gate were to be blocked.
Oh, so that's already existing with a Knox box, so the fire department's happy with it?
That's existing, and that easement, and in the conditions of approval, you'll see that we actually emphasize that they have to keep that 40-foot swath, I think it's 38 actually, of roadway clear so that the underlying easement owners can use that at any time.
Okay. So that side of the building, the east side, is the only side, I believe, that has first floor units that are accessible from the outside of the building. Is that correct?
Correct.
So are those in any way secure, or are they simply drive up? I don't see where they're going to include any security gates to control access to those units.
I see. There aren't any security gates proposed, there are not. But I'll let the applicant talk more about how the facility is secured.
Okay, all right. I wanted to go to a point actually that Commissioner Mead raised. So looking at the original SP, the objectives, 2A, create a mixed-use plan development containing family-type cafes, restaurants, commercial recreation amenities, convenient shopping, services and related uses, serving those residing or working in the immediate surrounding neighborhoods, and to produce goods and services desired by the community in general. So it sounds like the objective originally was very much for it to be a local or village type design. And then I look at the now proposed list of allowed and disallowed usage. First of all, I wondered, why is a thrift store not something that would be useful to people in that neighborhood? Why is it excluded from the list?
We kept that excluded consistent with the original specific plan, or the specific plan right now does not allow thrift stores. And so we carried that forward.
Do we know why it wasn't? I mean, there's no rationale?
I'm sure there is, but that was back in late 90s, early
Right.
2000s, and so predates.
I mean, right next door we have a dollar store, so it's like, you know, it's attractive for lower income people. So I'm just wondering why that's excluded. And similarly, why in terms of that definition, is a storage facility permitted? How does it meet those aims to be this family community style area? See, what's in the plan at the moment, you know, the amendment, it has all those nice pictures of coffee shops and restaurants and all those things, but I'm not seeing any evidence that that is going to be built or will be built, and if anything is proposed, it will be under administrative review. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but what they could end up doing is putting another storage facility next door.
I understand. So the applicant is here and they can speak about phase 2 and if they have potential users or what their, what actions they've taken to look at build out of phase 2.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, we can talk to the applicant. I also note that in the original SP, they made reference to the, and I'll probably get this name wrong because I will, Awani principles. And do you think that those are being carried forward into this amendment?
So if I can respond to that, and I think this gets to staff's review of the original specific plan, and you've heard a little bit of this in the presentation thus far. It hasn't developed, and I don't know that there is a market for the uses or the architectural style in the original specific plan. The language sounds great. It is illustrative, it makes you feel good, but there's not a market for the uses or the development pattern that's shown in there. And I think what the commission is being presented tonight through the specific plan is a repositioning of that specific plan to be more responsive to the market while maintaining high-quality development standards that are not otherwise in our zoning code or in our design guidelines. And by going through the efforts to create that specific plan to elevate the development standards, the design standards within the specific plan above those that are in the zoning code and in our own design guidelines, the applicant has asked for some consideration for that administrative review process for subsequent phases of the development. So I think that it perhaps is the reason for the changes. It's in response to the market conditions and a repositioning of the specific plan to permit development that has not been seen in 30 years within this project site. And as well to grant some concession or some incentive to the applicant for putting that investment in to clear the barriers for this project, not just the immediate phase, but for the future phases of the project, where a small restaurant, a smaller project, they may not have that capital backing. They may not have the ability to go through an extensive and exhaustive planning process to amend that specific plan. So I think you're seeing someone come in and trying to rework one of the stale, dated, and obsolete specific plans that we have on the Date Palm corridor to permit development where there is a market demand for it.
In terms of administrative review, though, would you see a second storage facility being approved? I don't think there's anything objectively in our ordinance that forbids that.
I don't think there would be a market for it, but I think that's something for the commission to discuss, and if there needs to be a modification or a change to the specific plan to restrict self-storage on the second phase of this project, I think that's within the purview of the Planning Commission.
So
Okay.
we could potentially add an amendment to say in phase 2 there will not be.
If that's a concern of the Planning Commission, that's in your purview.
Yeah. Okay. As usual, Commissioner Mead stole many of my points. So, yeah, on parking, I wanted to talk a bit about parking. I understand what was in the report, and we're saying, well, you know, generally we have a lower need for parking for a storage facility. And that was based on some research, which unfortunately I wasn't able to look at, but this is a different kind of facility. I reviewed a number of facilities in the area, not just in in Cathedral City, but also Palm Springs and Palm Desert. And they typically have more of an open plan where access is from the outside. There's a lot of road structure within the facility. And so, of course, people don't need to park outside. They park outside, as it says in the report. They park outside to rent a space, and then the rest of the time they're going to go through the gate and they're going to access the facility from inside. So I'm not sure where you've got an air-conditioned building with 842 units, that same rationale applies. And I'm wondering, were there any other reports for that specific type of use to determine the actual parking need?
So when we did look at surrounding cities in our region or in our valley, as indicated in the staff report, and they did have a lesser parking requirement than our city standards. Our city standard was very excessive. It would have been over 100 parking spaces required, and so there wasn't a distinction whether how you access the storage facility, whether it was indoor access or all exterior access. There was, the cities that we looked at just had a blanket for for storage facilities. These were the parking spaces required. They all have a lesser standard than we do. In addition, the ITE, which is I forget what the I stands for, but for traffic engineers, what's the I stand for? ITE. The ITE? Yeah. So that also looks at different types of uses and the parking demands based upon certain times of days, and based on that, it also identified a lesser parking demand. So we felt that for this particular type of use, a lesser parking demand was supportable. In addition, I will say, Commissioner Lee, that the applicant has operated a facility similar to this as well, and so there's just operational standards that are observed through this other business.
So we actually have a direct comparison with some other facility?
I believe we do. George, we do have that right. Yeah.
Well,
And
we can come back to it.
yeah, he'll come back up.
Yeah. Okay. And then there is a mention also that there would be a reciprocal arrangement with other units in phase 1, I guess, or possibly in phase 2 as well, to use that parking. But again, my point is that if the access is all from the outside, then people have to transfer goods from their cars or their vehicles into this facility, presumably through the front door. I'm assuming there's only that one main entrance.
Well, there's two elevator access points on the back side, on the east side, and then one on the north side.
But no parking in those areas?
There's not on the back end. There's a loading area on the back end, and there's a few parking spaces up front as well.
Those are emergency exits. Yes, I'm going to tell you, these are very common in areas of high heat in Las Vegas and in Arizona, Phoenix, Scottsdale area. That's all you see is the indoor storage. You go through one main door, so they have security control. That's the gate that you would normally come in on the outside to approach an exterior unit. And you go through, they have dollies and carts there, and you go to a unit and you load in and load out. Having experience, having had a unit in Scottsdale, when I went to my unit, I never saw anyone else. Parking lot was empty. But ITE, we did the comparison on the ITE, and our parking was very extreme to what really storage units demand. So it's pared down to be comparable to the ITE, which is the International Traffic Engineering Institute statistics.
I don't doubt that a lesser number is appropriate. I'm just not sure whether we got to the right lesser number here. Given the large number of units and the small number of parking spaces. I'm thinking at times like Thanksgiving and Christmas, when people are turning up to get their party decorations or whatever, that you can end up with a lot of people that are not able to access that site. So that's my concern. Okay. On the monument sign, it actually seemed, when we've looked at other sites, we've had bigger, more prominent signs. And I'm thinking about the traffic on Date Palm. It's a pretty busy road. So I'm wondering why they chose a fairly low level. I think it's 6 foot in height. It's not going to make it easy to see it, I think, because they've got a lot of landscaping along that front.
Yep. That's a question for the applicant. They proposed that size.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I think we've already covered the details about the Rosemont road extension, and also that everything would be under administrative review once this is passed for phases 1 and 2, yes?
Correct.
Okay. I think that's all I had for you. Oh, no, there's kind of an important thing that I need to ask you. Just before the meeting, we received information, a very detailed report from Peerless at Monmouth, and I needed to find out probably from City Council, if we have an actual response to this so that we can evaluate whether or not any of these claims are valid.
So we actually do not. We did receive this at about 1 o'clock this afternoon, and that time frame just doesn't allow us to adequately analyze and respond. I know that they had references to certain CCNRs, but we don't have those in front of us, so I'm unable to address their concerns at this moment.
Okay, so at this point then, the Commission cannot say for certain that these claims are invalid.
So our office, the City Attorney's Office, can't weigh in on that, and I think that sometimes you look to our office to see, what position that comments are taking. But we were unable to provide any kind of response at this time.
Would we be able to research that if we consider this at a later date?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions for staff? So if the applicant would like to come up.
Please state your name.
Thank you, Commission members, staff. My name is Rob Bernheimer, and I represent the applicant. We do have our team here today to go over a number of things. I want to get to your questions, and I may have some questions about your questions, but I want to take a step back first and kind of say, how did we get here, which I think helps frame where we've come from. And I've been a planning commissioner, so I've sat in your seat. I know how this goes, and I know you have a lot of questions going on in your mind, and I'm going to try to answer as many of those that I can. This site has basically sat vacant. It was planned in the 90s, so it's 30 years under this plan or variations of it, and it never got built. You could say market conditions. We looked at it and thought that because of what was in the specific plan, it needed to be updated, and I think the city agreed. It's a very expensive process to do the CEQA, to do a traffic study, fair share agreement. That took a lot of time. My client had to close escrow on the property, so my client's $3 million into it today, just to get to this point. And so part of it was we went to the city and we said, the city staff, and we said, we know we have a use right now to put in self-storage, and self-storage is prohibited in this area. If we go through the expense of updating the specific plan and doing the CEQA and trying to get life into this project, can we have self-storage on part of it and then the rest of it develop in a commercial realm? I think our deal with the city, and whether it's reflected in the conditions or not, we can adjust that, but there's not going to be more self-storage on this site. That only goes into phase 1. It'll be other things. And the city staff had suggested they want to see some revenue-producing projects there. So that's been a multi-year process to get to this point, and that was sort of the vision: is let's update this. And as we went through it, it was as somebody who represents people who go into projects like this, public hearings, CEQA are barriers to entry, and that's why things don't get developed sometimes. So we all got together and said, what can we do to set the table for the next ones coming in? Let's have all the conditions of approval. Let's figure out what the public infrastructure is. Let's come up with the design standards so everybody can be comfortable with the uses and the design, and then when design review comes in, it will go through a design review process administratively. If there's some changes into the uses or what have you, then it would have to go back to the Planning Commission. So that was kind of the thinking coming into that, and why my client was willing to invest what he invested or they invested. And my clients are here, Jason Borg and Blake Schoenberg. They're back there. They're happy to also answer questions. I want to in addition to your questions, I want to touch 4 areas: the height, the elevations, the changes that were made, the conditions of approval, which John went through pretty extensively, Rosemont going through, and the late letter you got from Peerless. I want to address that directly. With regards to the elevation, that was just sort of originally the wrong elevation got transmitted to the city, the right one got transmitted, but then when the city posted the staff report, it posted the wrong one and not the right one. So you guys, that was submitted a while ago to the city, but you guys saw the wrong one. The reality is it lowers the elevation, so it has less of an impact, so I think that's pretty much of a no-brainer. With regards to the conditions of approval, almost all the edits you see in front of you today are to deal with the complicated issues of future fair share reimbursements and how that's triggered. Most of the other conditions are just were the same conditions that you had when the staff report was issued, and they're pretty standard conditions. So they're technical and they're complicated. We've reviewed them and we accept them. So we're fine with the way that they're worded. As far as Rosemont's going through, because I know that there have been, both during the public comment process and afterwards, a number of residents in that neighborhood don't seem like they're objecting to our project, they're objecting to Rosemont going through. And from our perspective, we're neutral. Do you want Rosemont to go through? Great. You don't want Rosemont to go through? Fine. We'll build out Rosemont so that it can be used by the Wren, it can be used by our project, it can go across the street to the future commercial site. But if there's community objection to the road going through, the city, you as a recommendation or the city council can say, nope, let's not open that up. But my understanding is that's always been on the plan to be opened a through street to Date Palm, and that's why we're being required to build it. We're happy to build it. Opening up is up to you guys. We don't have an opinion on that. You asked about notice to, I'm going to get to your questions, Commissioner Lee, notice to Heritage Park. Beatrice Eslamboli's in the audience. She's with CV Strategies. She's been spearheading the communications that we've done to keep the neighbors informed. They created a website so people could see what the project was. We held a community meeting, and in that notice was sent out, and Beatrice actually went to Heritage Park and they posted a notice of the community meeting for the renters to see. So, and she spoke to the general manager to get the word out. So we did outreach, even though, and we did that specifically because we know that official notice always goes to property owners, and so not everybody's always informed. So we tried our best to reach out to as many people as possible. We held a community meeting. There wasn't a lot of people that showed up, as usually is the case, but a few people showed up, and as the website generated some inquiries, all of those were responded to, and we provided the information that they wanted. I didn't quite understand your question on security at the facility. You had a question early on about security at the facility, and I didn't quite understand it, so I want to respond to that.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the plans we have before us, and there may be more detail. The east side of the building has 27 accessible units from the first floor, so they drive up and you can store things.
Correct.
Now, typically in a storage facility, that access is protected behind a security gate, video cameras and so on. But it appears that in this facility, you can just drive all the way around it.
That's correct.
There's no control.
There'll be video control. So
Okay.
they'll have video, video all around, and the person inside will have
Right.
that. And
Is
those
there-
will be individually locked, too.
I understand. It's just commonly there is also a security gate that prevents people just driving up and, cutting a lock and taking stuff out. Now, that's an operational consideration for you, and your customers would decide whether or not they want to do it. I just wanted to understand how you are planning to operate.
Yeah, well, we had the challenges of the easements for fire access for the other community. We have the challenge of fire access for our, perimeter for fire access. And we decided to do it that way, and still be able to provide roll-up options for potential patrons. And I think, Jason, if I'm not mistaken, you've done this, there's other projects that have it like this on the closed facility. So this isn't unique to the whole self-storage situation. I do know that we don't have a lot of these single, two-story, air-conditioned controlled self-storage buildings. Most of them are the kinds that you've been talking about, but they're in a lot of locations and they operate. I'll jump forward to your question about parking. Actually, the ITE standard says 6. So we're doubling the ITE standard. And
So do you know if that is based on a particular design? Because, as I said, with an open design with open roads inside, all the vehicles go through the security gate, then they load and unload, then they go out the security gate. That's not the public parking at the front of the building. So,
I don't think the ITE distinguishes it, but that's why we
Right.
also doubled it, so that we have more than what that standard was. In fact, we have more than any other standard of the ordinances in the Coachella Valley. We went to 12. The most was 10 plus two per caretaker unit, and we don't have a caretaker unit. So we went higher just to make sure we weren't shorting parking, but also based on my client's experience and expertise in developing projects such as this was more than ample parking, even for a project that you're describing, which doesn't have interior parking. But we also have the roll-up ones in the back. So those people using those units aren't going to be parking in front. They're going to be driving around back and using their access back there. So it's not really 100% of the users are going to be using the entrance.
Well, you have 27 of those units. You have 842 units in total. So
Yeah.
you're close to 100%. But anyway, could I ask you, because you've mentioned your clients, but is there going to be? Do you have, or can you reveal any operator of this facility? Is it going to be a national company, or is it going to be held by your clients?
It's going to be a national operator.
Okay.
I don't know that we can reveal.
Okay.
Can you reveal it yet?
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Usage, you asked, what about a thrift shop? The uses on this, the uses that are in that list of allowable and prohibited, we had a much larger list that we suggested. Staff culled it down to the ones that they thought were appropriate. And so there's no magic to it other than adhering to the concept that most of, they wanted a good chunk of phase 2 to be revenue producing in some way for the city. I certainly don't have objections to adding thrift stops in. I don't know if staff has objections to that. We'd welcome that. The more uses for us, the better. So that was really limited by what staff had recommended in this specific plan. So if more allowable uses want to be put in there, we're fine with that. I do think, in all fairness to our negotiations with staff, they probably should be something that generates sales or other type of tax that benefits the city, because that was definitely our deal going into this. think I addressed the fact of why we did storage. We addressed parking, signage. The building itself will have, most storage buildings have a big sign on the building, so it didn't feel like we needed a big sign down there for phase one. So that's why, you don't need a huge building there and a big sign on the building.
But the monument sign will have the names of other tenants. So, they're going to be sort of hidden down at floor level, and you're going to have a big sign for the storage unit. So.
Well, or they'll be on the top of that sign because the storage unit has a bigger sign. That hasn't, the actual signage hasn't been worked out, but the monument is what they wanted to use as far as this facility, and they thought it was sufficient to draw in the traffic that they were doing. Which gets us to the late filed Peerless opposition. And I've seen before where people put in a big thick letter at the last minute, and then there's a tendency to, let's continue this so we can address that. And then I've done that before, and then right when we get to the hearing 2 weeks later, they file another big thing, and we're in the same position. And I don't think these issues are that complicated, so I'd like to try to address them and satisfy any concerns that you have. If you look at that letter, most everything they're talking about is their interpretation of the CC&Rs. You are not the judge of the CC&Rs. In fact, you don't enforce the CC&Rs. You don't really have anything to do with the CC&Rs. What you have to do with the specific plan. And they're right in pointing out that the specific plan prohibits self-storage. We knew that going in. That's why we're here. You have the authority to make that decision to change the specific plan. You handle the zoning, which is done through the specific plan. We disagree with their interpretation of everything that they've put out in the CC&Rs. And my clients hired separate counsel that specializes in CC&Rs, which is one of the reasons why we lowered the height of that building, because the CC&Rs cap height at 25 feet. We wanted the storage building to make sure that if you approved it, that would also satisfy the CC&Rs. Other arguments about a main drive aisle, we have a main drive aisle. It's now going slightly altered to the back, but we preserved a main drive aisle going through the project, so you can get from Rosemont through phase 2, through our phase, behind our storage, and out to McCallum. That's all preserved. So I don't want to go through chapter and verse and tell you why their arguments in the CC&Rs are wrong, because you guys don't sit as judge and jury for the CC&Rs. If they dispute what we are doing under the CC&Rs, their remedies are specified in the CC&Rs, whether that's mediation, arbitration, or litigation. That's a different judicial process, so to speak, than coming before you folks. So I don't disagree that the original specific plan had a different vision than what we have and prohibited the use that we have. That's all accurate. But there's nothing that says a city can't change its zoning. There's nothing that says the city can't change its specific plan. And that's what we're here doing. We reached out to this owner initially, and we tried to get them to agree to amend the CC&Rs because we would like to do things differently. We would have originally liked to do things differently. We've modified the plan so that we believe we can comply with the CC&Rs with the amendments to the specific plan. You'll also notice that the specific plan allows for heights higher than 25 feet. The specific plan allows for heights in later phases higher than 25 feet. We left that in because maybe the CC&Rs will be amended someday, and we didn't want to have to come back to the city and amend the specific plan as well. So now, if you guys pass something that says we can go to, 34 feet, or forget the number off the top of my head, well, if somebody comes in next week and wants to build something and the CC&Rs don't get amended, they're going to be capped at 25 feet under the CC&Rs. So they're probably not going to come in and apply for something higher than 25 feet, knowing that their neighbor can stop the construction. So that's kind of an overview of our response to the Peerless letter. I have gone through it in detail. I can tell you that they've misled you on some of their claims about what the CC&Rs say, but I don't think we need to get into that.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
Yeah, I guess I have a general question that's maybe towards you and maybe also towards the city. When you look at the specific plan, the proposed specific plan amendment, it's full of outdoor seating areas and places for people to relax and covered areas, and it looks like a place you'd want to spend time, right? But then when you look at the uses that are being proposed for both Phase 1 and Phase 2, maybe with the exception of a little bit of retail, 2 fast food drive-through restaurants, people are not going to be sitting around, they're going to be in their car. Small retail, maybe grocery stores might have a little bit of outdoor space like a Whole Foods might. Certainly not self-storage. So to me, there's like a very strong mismatch between what you're proposing as what looks like a nice community area and open space versus the actual uses that are being proposed. So I'm wondering, how do you reconcile that mismatch? Because when we look at the plans of the parking lot from above, there's no open space. There are no park areas with benches and people to sit. So how is that actually getting incorporated?
So it's a little challenging in that we tried to look from a CEQA perspective of what the most intense uses were. And the grocery store the big box grocery store wasn't on the plan in the first draft of the specific plan amendment and when we first did the CEQA. When we were probably a couple months away from probably going to public hearing, a grocery store came to the city, and the city said, hey, can you revise your CEQA, can you revise your plan? That's when we came up with these multi-phases. For CEQA, we wanted to look at what the most intense uses would be, which would be things like drive-through and the grocery store. However, restaurants, you could have a sit-down restaurant in here with a patio, that would be an allowable use. That type of restaurant doesn't generate the same amount of traffic as fast food, so we wanted to analyze the fast food from a traffic standpoint and the impacts that would create, but still allow the flexibility to build things out. So there may be uses that get built in there that have those types of outdoor spaces that people can use. Or maybe there's, two fast foods that get built. I don't know how that's gonna play out.
I guess my question is what's the point in us revising this specific plan to encourage that kind of thing if theoretically you could put in 5 drive-through fast food restaurants and we'll get none of what we see in that specific plan? And this is where it becomes a question for staff, is if we're going to go through the process of amending it so that you can put in a use that's technically not allowed, right? And what the city gets out of it is, hey, we're going to update the design standards and get something that's really nice. But we're also saying we're going to have no input at all on what actually goes in there other than it has to be on this list, and we could end up with 5 drive-through fast food restaurants, none of what's in the actual specific plan other than some varied materials and heights, and otherwise it's just going to look like any other strip mall. So how do we ensure that we actually get what we're agreeing to here?
I think the details are in the specific plan itself, and I would say that the applicant has characterized the discussions with staff correctly. Staff was not enamored with a self-storage facility on this site, and I think we were looking for a way to perhaps permit the project while creating opportunities for future development within the property. And I would say that the idea of looking at a set of land uses that could be permitted on Phase 2 that may be more in the community interest, looking at what is potentially in demand in the market, what may contribute positively to the future development on the Date Palm corridor. That's what made the list. We were looking for the revenue generating uses. We were looking for uses that we're getting inquiries for those uses on Date Palm, but there's not an available site. So we did work with the applicant to identify a list of permitted uses that could contribute in some positive way to the city. We also looked at the standards that are within the specific plan, the building design, the materials, the architectural character, building form and massing, the open spaces and shade. You've identified these. We don't have that level of detail in our zoning code or in our design guidelines. So the applicant has proposed language that would form as a guideline for future phases of development that come into the city. And I would say that even fast food can have outdoor patios, can have well-designed, well-thought-out, well-executed outdoor space. spaces. And I do think that this gives us some parameters that we can review those land uses that are shown as possible uses for the Phase 2, and it is a higher quality project than we would otherwise get through our conventional zoning in the code today.
Okay.
And pedestrian connectivity from use to use, which is talked about in the specific plan.
Any further questions for the applicant? No? Thank you. Let me just follow up with Director Feiser. In terms of administrative review under this amendment, would you have some control over the types of businesses that were being added, or would you have to approve any of those permitted businesses?
If it's a permitted use, we would permit it. We would not disqualify one bank but permit another bank, for instance.
Right.
One fast food over another fast food. No, if it's a fast food and it's a permitted use, we would allow it,
Okay,
provided it meets the standards and everything that's in the specific plan.
right. Okay, at this point, I'll open this to public comment.
Yes, we did receive a speaker slip before the meeting started. So if that person would like to step up.
I have,
Okay, please state your name. Yeah, so
Okay.
she'll go after that, this gentleman. If you could
Okay.
just say your, no, that's fine, that's fine.
Okay.
Go ahead
Yeah.
and please state your name and city of residence.
Okay. My name is Scott Zastro. I'm from Holland, Michigan. I'm the owner of Peerless at Mammoth and the property just to the south of this development that's being proposed. As a company, we'd like nothing more than to see this development or the properties to the north be developed, because that would obviously help us for our future tenants and such. But we contest that the proposed project has not been done legally. I understand their attorney here is saying that he has a different opinion, and unfortunately, based on what he said tonight, it probably will go a different direction, unfortunately. Date Palm Rosemont Realty is not the, the consenting owner of the property at this time, as far as we know, based on the records that we've done through the research through the county. The original Date Palm, Date Palm LLC, they were the original owners of the property and the developers, and then they had Date Palm McCallum become the consenting owner at one point. But after that, there's nobody who became the consenting owner of the property. And as such, that means that there isn't currently a consenting owner overseeing the business improvement area, basically. And what that means is, under the CCNRs, we're supposed to bring our projects to the consenting owner for review to ensure that it meets the conditions of the CCNRs. And that hasn't been done. So what that means is what's been done is null and void, essentially, from our perspective. The Uptown planning, or the Uptown Village, was planned with the original CCNRs with the city attorney and the planning department. That was recorded back in 2012, I believe it was. Within that, there was an Exhibit C. In Exhibit C, that basically stated there was supposed to be a main drive aisle. And I don't know if you all have seen the map. Sandra showed this map earlier. It looks like this. And there's a road that runs through the property there, and then the central road also. Well, if you look at that and transpose that over the parcel map, that road runs right along the parcels. And what was in the CCNRs is that the drive aisles were to be maintained. They could be adjusted slightly, providing they didn't adversely affect the adjacent property owners or any of the parcel owners. It isn't even that you have to be adjacent, it's all parcel owners. Well, in this case, what they're proposing is they're going to put a large 251-foot wall all the way across from the west property line to the east property line, and that obstructs what that road should be. My property built that road, what is known as San Vincent Way. We have that built behind our property now. Dollar Tree has that same portion built behind their property. So there's 300 feet of St. Vincent Way that was built. It has a guardrail at the end of it to prohibit people from going into the desert area, the area. Those aisles were designed to have circulation requirements met and adequate circulation, and that was all something that the city felt was important at that time. And I'm a professional engineer. When we design projects, typically we don't want traffic from a development to be pushed back out onto the main street because it creates congestion. By putting this building in that space, the people from my property will now have to go out essentially and go down there. Now today's staff said, well, they can use this road that's behind this building. But if you look at that, it looks like the store, the back alley road of a store.
So, Mr. Zastrow, if you could just wrap up your comments, you are limited to 3 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
The main thing is the main drive aisle is being affected by this project that they're proposing. And it's protected by the common area portion of the CC&Rs. And under Section 4 of the CC&Rs, there are easements established for those main drive aisles and the common areas. Those are irrevocable. They can't be changed. I can't change it. They can't change it. Together we can't change it. In Section 12 of the CC&Rs, it says it's permanent. They're contesting that there's a different understanding of the word permanent, and I have a hard time understanding what that difference would be. But I guess we'll have to wait and see. But we would appreciate it if you would continue this meeting so that they wouldn't have the opportunity to move forward, and then we can contest this, and we'll have to do it in another forum, apparently, is what the attorney's telling us.
Thank you. Galina Harvey.
Hello. Good evening, commissioners, and good evening, staff, and good evening, public. What I heard today a little bit threw off my speech, but I will try to adapt. Something new that I heard from the Director of Engineering, but anyway, Galina Harvey, I live in Cathedral City on Rosemont Road. I live from 1999, and my husband has been living over there since 1991, I believe, 1991, 92. So first, it's very good to have that area being developed. It's very good because to have an empty desert is not a very good thing. But please do not develop it just for the sake of being developed. Because if we're building something over that we would like to see something that is going to be used. Right now, I'm not really sure how this unit is going to be used because I can imagine, like what I imagine about the storage facility is kind of like when you have furniture or something else that you don't want to store and you don't have any room to store, you would drive somewhere up to some kind of little gate and you drop that over there. Over here, I can see that that's going to be something that you put in the boxes and then carry the boxes somewhere and then put the boxes in the elevator and store it somewhere in that facility. Might work, I don't know, like what, pins, needles, yarn, something might work. I don't know how good the use is going to be. But anyway, it's good to be developed. Then second, I want to thank Sandra Molina and also Planning Department, Engineering Department for providing us with some documents that we tried to get as a public records request. We did not get everything that we wanted to, and one of the things that we didn't get is the traffic study that was done in the beginning of 2000. I believe it was 2001, maybe 2004. So, but maybe there is no record of that study, and maybe there was not enough time to find that. So, looks like this specific plan amendment calls for opening Rosemont Road through traffic. Now, what I can see from a developer's representative, it's a little bit two separate issues. So, we probably even can separate that all because the approval of the through road maybe has nothing to do with this development. But anyway, I was going to mainly talk about the through road. But first, when I was looking at that proposed Uptown Village SPA, looks like it's called our street as Rosemont Avenue, Rosemont Drive, Once even we had the street sign that's called it Rosemont, which is, I don't know, does it matter? Probably it doesn't. But there's no street with the name Rosemont Avenue. There is Rosemont Road, and it's being called whatever in the plan. But this is just, I digressed. So history of Rosemont Road versus Date Palm goes back to 1992 when it was dedicated as a cul-de-sac, and actually all the sale of the houses was done under that impression that the road is not going to be a through road. So since that, I know that decisions have been changed by the council and by the commissions too, but anyway, for quite some time that road stayed open, so that construction portion of the blacktop was there, which probably was demolished again in the beginning of 2000s, probably 2004, something like that.
Again, Ms. Harvey, your 3 minutes is up, so if you could wrap up your comments.
Yeah, okay. May I ask somebody to put the screen side, the last one that John Corello was using with the road through, to go through? I'm very sorry that I didn't even know that the time goes up.
Sure.
Yes. The very last one, yeah, the very last one. Probably. The very, very, very last. Yeah, one of those. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. So what I'm saying, like that traffic study that was done, it showed that the speed on our road was in excess of 40 miles an hour. And when the traffic study was done, it showed that the speed on our road was in excess of 40 miles an hour because it was open to Date Palm, and people are rushing into the neighborhood mainly to the school traffic. It's due to the school traffic. But now, if you can see, like if we're talking about school traffic on McCallum, or if we're talking about Vega, as the director of engineering was saying, that there is no houses that's facing the street. And now we're going to be having bottleneck that goes from open on the Rosemont at 60 feet wide. Now then it goes to the 40 feet wide Rosemont Road with a dozen of houses facing that road. And also there is a bend, there's a curve on that road that's not exactly seen over here, but if you would go, maybe the traffic consultant would go over there and try to see how that bend is actually going over there. It will be very difficult to back out, at least like from my property for sure.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
Everything. So, I'm sorry. So what I'm hoping is, as it was suggested by the developer, that maybe we can have a gate for emergency access of the emergency vehicles over there somewhere, but not to let the road go through. So, but the traffic study is needed. Thank you.
Yeah. Are there any further public comments?
I'm sorry I didn't get the form to fill out. My name is Carl Peterson, P-E-D-E-R-S-E-N. I live at 30640 Zero Place. And the objection I have to this plan is the opening of Rosemont Road. Right now, it is a dead-end street. It terminates at Sierra Place. It is not paved nor are there any curbs going towards State Palm. And then nowhere in the discussion is there anything about who is responsible for, if you're going to open it up, who's going to pay to pave that and curb it and put sidewalks in, etc. And so, as a resident of the area, we're asking that the Planning Commission not approve the opening of Rosemont Road as a through street, because this morning alone with the traffic, the school traffic on McCollum and 30th, it was just a nightmare. And if that's opened up on Rosemont, that's going to be another shortcut for the kids to go to school every day. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further public comments? Yes, sir.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Gary Bryant, and I also live at 30574 Sierra Place. I've listened to the meeting today, and it appears that there are more questions than answers. I did hear the developer say they did not care whether the road was, Rosemont Road was open or closed. And I want to echo my neighbor's comment. I do not believe Rosemont Road should be open. The level of congestion, traffic, I believe, will not serve the best interests of the residents of the community. I bought my home in 2011. It is a second home with an intent that I would retire here. I like Cathedral City, but when I received my notice that the issue was going to be discussed, I felt compelled to come and voice my opposition to the opening of Rosemont Road. I do not believe the commission should make a decision this evening. I think there are many more questions that were raised, and I would encourage you to delay that decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other further public comments? Yeah, if there's, just make sure there's nobody else.
Do we have anyone else in the public wishing to speak that's not representing the applicant? No? Okay.
Thank you. Good evening again. My name is Rob Bernheimer. I've heard a couple people suggest continuance, and I just want to address that. The Peerless folks said continue it so maybe they can find some other remedy. If this is challenged in court, it's not ripe until the city council makes the final determination, that you make your recommendation. So we've got to go through this process before we go through the CC&R process. So continuing it doesn't solve that problem. On the issue of Rosemont Road, I don't know that continue it changes. At some point, somebody's got to make a decision. Do you want to have Rosemont Road opened or not? I think we have all the facts in front of us. The traffic engineer has studied it, and nobody thinks it's going to create a significant traffic impact in the neighborhood. Regardless of whether it's opened or not, to answer the last gentleman's question, the road, the curb, and the gutters are going to be installed in a fair share agreement between phase 2 of this project, the REN. So those are going to get installed to be used regardless of whether Rosemont Road's open. So I think we have the information before us to make the decision tonight. I don't know what kicking the can down the road provides different information. You may have some different thoughts on that, I don't know. I would also point out that the underlying zoning, the PCC zone, which the specific plan overrides, but if you look at the PCC zone to the north and to the other side of us, those actually allow for self-storage. So self-storage is allowed in this area. It just was, for whatever reason, prohibited when the original specific plan was provided. So it's not necessarily a use that is frowned upon in this general locale, number one. Number two, why are we building self-storage? It's a huge benefit for for your community, because there right now is a lack of units. That's why the rates are so high. I have a storage unit for my business. The rates, I'd pay a third of the rates if I was in LA County from what I'm paying for the size that I have, because they have a much larger supply. There's not enough supply for self-storage units. There's particularly not enough supply of air-conditioned units to satisfy the businesses and residents of Cathedral City. And that's why that's what's driving this. So I think with the apartments going in, sometimes those lack a lot of storage. The businesses that come along, Date Palm, if you go down, if you look at a lot of the self-storage places, there's not a lot of units for rent, and that's why the rates are so high. So we think we're bringing something just in that alone that's a positive for this neighborhood and a positive for the city.
Thank you. If there are no further public comments, I'll now close the public comments. And I'll ask for a motion from the commissioners to open discussion.
For the purposes of discussion?
Yes.
So I guess for the purposes of discussion, I can make the motion to adopt the staff's recommendations as they currently stand, and then we can amend it as our discussion goes. Being a newbie on here, I'm not quite sure how this process works.
We're just opening for discussion of the motion, yeah, so.
So
Okay.
I move that we approve.
Well, second, there you go.
Commissioners, if I can add.
Yes.
There was a lot of changes on the red lines, and we've identified probably 5 or 6 Scribner's errors that need to be corrected. If you provided that motion the latitude to just clean up from the CUP to the right phase and all that, there was a few that weren't changed. If you allow that latitude for staff to do, just Scribner's errors, not changing any of the conditions of substance, we would appreciate that.
Okay, well, let's consider where we are. So we're open for discussion. Commissioner McPhail?
We did hear in the public hearing section some concerns regarding Rosemont, and we heard the applicant say they're agnostic on the issue of having Rosemont go all the way through. I guess general question for staff, in terms of the other phases of this overall development, like phase 2 and Wren, is there would it be required for those later developments? Like when Wren comes in, do they need to have access to Rosemont? Rosemont going to go through with one of these subsequent?
Commissioner McPhail, I'm so sorry. Could we move your mic closer to yourself?
Let me start.
Did you hear my question?
Yes.
Okay.
Is the Wren necessary? Yes. The Wren's main entrance is off of Rosemount. Rosemount is a dedicated road to the city already. So we're not asking for any right-of-way dedications from any of these 2 developers because they've already dedicated those in the past. So on paper, that road exists. So they are connecting to basically and improving a public roadway.
So if and when Wren happens, they will require Rosemont as to access?
Correct. If Rosemount goes in first, they'll be improving the bulk of that street all the way up to the south Rosemount, where the curb and gutter would be. There would be pavement up to there. Rosemount would come in and finish that off. If it's vice versa, the opposite, if Rosemount phase 2 goes in, they'll be improving the bulk of the street with the curb, gutter, and sidewalk left to the other side, basically to improve the street.
Right, but I think
that's common equity when you're doing development amongst developers when building new infrastructure.
I think, I don't want to misstate what you're asking, but it sounds like what you're asking, and it was one of the questions I was going to have as well, is clearly the pavement's going to go through. The pavement's going to connect the existing residential neighborhood with State Palm. However, does traffic need to flow through? So could there be a gate that gates off their communities so that traffic flow can't go through, but that the rest of Rosemont from their development to Date Palm can still be used by the Wren and by this development?
Technically, if it was approved, the challenge is a public roadway is a public roadway. And if it was a private roadway, it could be gated. So precluding access, especially when that roadway was designed 30 years ago when the track was developed. And, the city at the time did not put that in because it would have had to expend its own funds to do that. So these are the opportunities that we do to develop it. I'll give you another example, exact same example. Vega, which is the extension of Rosemount on the other side at Landau, was 30 years past the Salvation Army. It was a dead end. And then when Salvation came in, Salvation Army, they improved the north side of the street up to a point. When the Veterans Village came in, They improved the whole south side, opened up Vega, and it became an open street. So there were that concerns at that same time, and we haven't heard any impacts related to that as well. So, and there was a traffic study with that as well. So it's a very similar situation. We have streets that the city's not going to spend money on to extend because we know the private developers would be improving those. And that's a normal practice for the expansion of a growing city.
So if I can bring us back to the amendment to the specific plan and the details of that, what are your feelings on the specific plan?
Well, I think from our discussion earlier, it does sound like with administrative approval that we wouldn't have a future impact in. It seemed like there might be some interest in maybe making that a bit clearer that, and I think the applicant said the same thing, that there's no intention to have a storage facility in phase 2. Should we maybe codify that in some way in amending this motion? So that would be one of the uses that does not happen in phase 2.
So you'd consider adding a condition that only one storage unit could be built in phase 1 and phase 2? Would that cover it?
That seemed to be.
Okay.
I just want to say also, I didn't get the letter that you guys got. Was that you said it was late this afternoon, so I haven't had.
It was distributed at the beginning of the meeting. Yeah.
It was just here.
Yeah.
And that's in relation to the first speaker's comment. It's that group. Okay. All right. I just because I had no idea about what that was.
So Commissioner Mead.
I just still have a concern about the fact that the specific plan doesn't really seem, the amendment to the specific plan doesn't seem to match what's being proposed now. And because we are not just us, but the community is not going to have any ability to have input on what goes in later, it seems very open to me, and I just have concerns that the way it gets developed isn't maybe going to be beneficial for the city. And I understand that the city wants to develop this land. I agree with one of the public commenters. I think it would be great for this land to be developed, but I also agree that development with something that's less than beneficial for the community is maybe potentially worse than it being undeveloped. And I understand that the city wants businesses that produce revenue. That makes total sense. However, as a resident and someone who would like to see Cathedral City become a great city in the future, and I know we spent a lot of time, we're talking about updating the zoning code, and we want to talk about what is Cathedral City's character. And my concern is that Cathedral City's character is going to be the city where all the fast food restaurants are. And I'm just a little concerned that the reason I asked about office space is we need jobs in this city, and it seems like if you work in the food industry, there's plenty of jobs here. But if you don't, there's not. And so I guess my concern as someone who wants to make this a great place for people to live and work is how do we make sure that as we approve these kinds of projects that we're not just setting ourselves up for 4 more fast food restaurants. Now, there's nothing wrong with fast food restaurants. I'm just trying to see, is there a way that we can broaden what Cathedral City is about and the kind of businesses that are here and provide for more diverse types of jobs? So, I mean, I guess I'm just looking for any way that we can tighten this up a little bit to hopefully provide a project that goes in phase 2 that is walkable for the people who live in the neighborhood next door, that is going to provide services they're going to use, that's not going to require as many cars driving there. I mean, I actually didn't spend as much time on the original specific plan, but when you just read that, I mean, it really occurred to me that that is what I would like to see Cathedral City be in the future, is a more village type. I mean, even the name of this project is Uptown Village, but there's nothing village about what's really being proposed. So again, I'm not against the development. I don't really have an issue with the storage facility, and I do appreciate the design of it. I think they did a great job with that, and I love the updated specific plan. I thought it looked great. I'm just concerned that what's going to be built isn't really going to fulfill it. So I'm open to any suggestions, but even from staff, I'm just looking for a way to make sure that it does fulfill what seems so great about the specific plan. And I do agree with what you said about putting in a condition that it only one self-storage unit.
So I think breaking it down, well, we have to have findings that we can support for our decision. Our job is, we're not designers. Our job is to ensure that the existing code is applied. It's again, might be my preference not to have a storage unit, but that isn't the issue at hand here. It's whether or not we're seeing something that fits within the rules and regulations.
Right, but we're also being asked to approve an amendment to the specific plan.
Yes.
So it seems like, and since there are many conditions that have already been implied by the city for that specific plan, if we wanted to add conditions or ask the city to study additional conditions and come back to us, that would be acceptable as part of the discussion of whether or not to amend the specific plan. Is that correct?
Yes, if there was something that you wanted the staff to look at in more detail, we could ask for a further report on that and then continue this to another time. But we would need to be specific to the staff and say what it is we're looking for. We can't simply say, generally speaking, it should be, a better or nicer or more village-like plan. So that's our issue. I think my bigger issue at the moment is yes,
sorry,
Sandra.
Commissioner Lee, our city attorney wished to say something.
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you. I just wanted to kind of clarify, as part of recommendations to City Council, a lot of times when we do come to Planning Commission, there may be discussions like this where, hey, we do have concerns, maybe we do need to tighten up the language, or, technically the way that it's written, we probably can allow another storage facility in Phase 2, even though that is not what is being proposed at all. Part of the recommendation as a whole can be, yes, we want to see this go through. We agree with staff's recommendation to adopt this specific plan, but these are the additional things that we think need to happen at the city council level and need to be presented at that hearing to be considered. Whether it's like, yes, we agree, but we need to modify the specific plan amendment to indicate that only one storage facility will be allowed within Planning Unit 4.
So we could approve with our commission's conditions, like the conditions of our
Correct.
approval would be these X
Correct.
things.
So we're approving a resolution to recommend
Subject to.
X to City Council, but with, these are the recommendations in addition that we would like City Council to consider as
Those
part of it.
recommendations could be characterized in the staff report as well in staff's presentation to council.
Okay, thank you.
And I understand that. The issue for us would be to put words together that represent our view that go as part of that recommendation. And that means, writing a recommendation here and now.
So we don't have to formalize it in any manner. We would do that in a staff report. But we do need clear direction on, hey, what I hear clearly so far, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that we do not want another storage unit in any other phase along with this Planning Unit 4 amendment.
I think that's part of the issue, but the other part is this discussion about what else will go in.
Sure. And so it would be addition to say that would be one point we want to make is, yes, we agree with this amendment, but this is like one of the issues that we want to see change before it's presented to City Council. And staff does the presentation and indicates this is what staff presented at Planning Commission. However, Planning Commission, after receiving the presentation, determined that there were additional considerations that needed to be included as part of that. So those additional considerations are what is going to be presented to City Council as a recommendation that they approve it in your manner. Does that make sense?
it makes sense. I'm only considering the drafting of such a recommendation.
Sure.
As Director said, you know, once this goes through, everything is under administrative review, and as long as it meets the underlying code and law, then there will not be a chance to say that you want a restaurant or a bowling alley or whatever it is you want. You're not going to have that ability to do that. So what we need to do then, I think your advice is that we need to put forward a recommendation that encapsulates our thoughts about diversity of units, more representative of those that were already presented in the staff report. So if you looked at what is in the amendment, we've got all those nice pictures of different businesses, and what we need to ensure is that that's the kind of business we get, and not, you know, lots and lots of drive-throughs or whatever.
Right, and at that direction, it would be our office working with staff along with the applicant to format that in a way that's presentable to City Council.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could distill my two things down to, I would ask that there be a condition to say no more than 2 fast food restaurants, and to ensure that not all 5 end up being that. And I think 2, I know that it puts restrictions on how you guys can use the property.
I was just going to
and-
suggest I know the public hearing is not open, but I was just going to suggest, we've only been planning on 2. That's all that was studied
Yeah.
in CEQA. So if you want to add an additional condition that only 2 fast food, we don't object to that at all.
Okay.
Because that was what the
Yeah,
plan
great.
was.
And then the other
Sorry,
one.
just for the record, because he's the applicant, he does get to respond or answer any questions that the commission may have, because it is
Yeah.
his.
And then the other thing would be to somehow work in, and I'm open to your guys' suggestions, but to work in that there be some minimum requirement for open space or outdoor space. And that could be attached to any of the uses that go in, but that there be some minimum requirement. So it's not just a big parking lot with 5 small buildings, or 4 small buildings and a storage unit. And that could be up to staff, whatever you think is reasonable, because I don't know what is reasonable and what would be too much of a burden on the developer, but just to have a minimum of some sort.
So I think you have 3 items that you want to. I'm sorry, we're finished with the public comment. So
As the city attorney stated, he's the applicant, he's allowed to comment.
okay.
Or just to answer any questions, the reason that we're specifically allowing this too is because, first of all, every applicant does have the right to rebuttal, so even after we close public comment, an applicant can always come back to address any issues that were presented at public comment.
Okay.
However, because this is a recommendation, he actually has to indicate whether his client agrees or not, and then we have an idea of how to present this at City Council, because we might differ, the commission might differ in their recommendation than maybe what they're agreeable to, but if he wants to indicate something else, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think part of it is we envision the development of the project in the same way you are seeing it. And I think it is written into this. The specific plan talks about some of the enhancements to open space and what have you. I think if you want to have add something in the project conditions that, because this is for staff's approval, that you ensure that staff adhere to the guidance in the specific plan, so that if we do come with a fast food restaurant, it's not going to be a fast food restaurant that's on the I-10 that doesn't have open space. It's going to have more open space, maybe outdoor seating, some extra shading structures and what have you, so that direction that staff adhere to the guidelines in the specific plan in any use that's proposed, not just a restaurant versus a fast food restaurant. But I think the language is in the specific plan. I think you just want to make sure that staff, if we come to you with one fast food, that they actually apply that to that one use and apply it to the next use as well.
Yeah, and I think I'm also just trying to get it, encouraging you guys to look for maybe some more interesting uses. because I think it is very easy to just pull in a fast food restaurant. You know, we know they're going to get traffic, and we know it's money for the city, and that's all great, but I guess I'm just trying to look for a way to sort of encourage you guys to look for, you know, there's a lot of things on that list. There's a ton of options, right?
And
let's see something we don't already have 100 of, you know, something that maybe would be a unique thing that people would come to Cathedral City for. Yeah.
That sounds good.
Yeah, I think you're hearing that, you know, the original plan is called Uptown Village for a reason, and we're not feeling as presented, it would be a nice village atmosphere, and we're trying to grapple with ways of stipulating that, and you've responded pretty well, I think, in terms of what we could do, for example, with a fast food restaurant with seating and some kind of covered area. But you know, I think that the covered areas, the greenery is important to us. Not having a second storage facility in phase 2 is important to us. What else did we?
And part of the applicant team is Steven Nieto, and he drafted the specific plan amendment, so he's way more familiar than I am, so I'll turn it over to him.
Good evening, Commissioners. Steven Nieto, I'm an urban designer and planner at the Altum Group. I worked with the applicant team to draft the specific plan. I want to address some of your comments about the village atmosphere. The 2 site plans that you see in the specific plan are scenarios. They represent some scenarios. They don't reflect the actual design of what could occur there. The details in the specific plan about open space, pedestrian safety, landscaping, enhanced building entries, screening from date palm, all those components are in the specific plan to ensure that this village atmosphere is maintained. This environmental only looks at 2 drive-through restaurants, and there's discussion about screening and how we address those. I think if a future drive-through does come through, it will be looked at closely with staff against some of the design guidelines and the character images in the specific plan to make what I think you guys are all looking for is that kind of village environment. One of the issues with the previous specific plan is it was so specific that nobody wanted to develop it, and that's the issue. We try to create a specific plan that was a little bit more fluid in how it can adapt to various design uses while maintaining some of those pedestrian connectivity principles that are baked in that specific plan. So the intent of what you guys are asking for really is in there, but it's going to be with future applicants and planning staff to really push those ideas through. So I'm happy to answer any more questions regarding the specific plan and its intent.
I think even though those ideas are embodied in the specific plan, and since there wasn't an objection anyway to adding that, I'm thinking what I hear is that we need to agree this, but add a recommendation to the City Council that they enforce 1 storage facility for phase 1 and phase 2, no more than 2 fast food restaurants in that whole block in phase 1, phase 2, and include open space compatible with the ideas expressed in the specific plan. Does that meet it? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for summarizing.
Well, so we need to cancel this vote, I think. I can't get back to the main page.
Okay, we're back.
Yes. So
we're going to open a new one to. We're approving, right, with added conditions, correct?
yes.
Okay. So go ahead and call for movers. All right.
So I'll move this, and what I'm moving is the motion as detailed in the agenda at 3.B, with the additional recommendations to the City Council that they limit storage facilities to 1 in the entire area, no more than 2 fast food restaurants, and include sufficient open space to meet the design requirements listed in the specific plan. So, I moved. Any second? Oh, it's seconded.
Excuse me, Commissioner Lee, would you mind also adding subject to the revised conditions of approval?
Oh, yes.
And-
Let me
and
amend
to-
that to subject to the conditions of approval as presented at the meeting.
Will
With,
do.
with the scrivener's corrections.
We're,
We'll
oh,
write those in.
and the corrections submitted by Director Corella.
Absolutely. So a motion was made by Commissioner Lee, seconded by Commissioner Mead, to approve item 3B with the added conditions of approval from Commission, as well as the addition to make Scribner's corrections. Motion carries.
Okay, good. And at this point, we are at 8:30. I am looking for advice from the staff. Do you wish to continue, or should we adjourn?
I think that's for the commission. I might suggest if the commission would like to take a 5-minute break, perhaps you could take a recess before continuing the meeting.
Okay. 5 minutes.
Adjourn.
Wait, what are we doing?
Yeah.
No, they're going to take it.
I thought there was no chance I was going to be here.
Okay, we've had our 5 minutes and we'll bring our meeting back to order. Item 3C. We already did 3B. Approval of a conditional use permit to establish a cannabis dispensary and distribution business within a 2,170 square foot tenant space in an existing building located in the I-1 Light Industrial Zoning District. Ms. Camps.
All right, good evening, Vice Chair Malakoff and Commissioners. My name is Dawn Camps. I'm Associate Planner here at the City. Today I will be presenting conditional use permit number 17012B for your consideration. The applicant proposes to establish a new cannabis dispensary and distribution business known as Cathedral City Relief within an existing tenant space in a multi-tenant building located at 68444 Perez Road. So the project is proposed to occupy suites A and B within the existing multi-tenant building. The site is located on the north side of Perez Road, approximately 180 feet west of Cathedral Canyon Drive. The project site is designated as industrial in the general plan land use map and is within the light industrial zoning district. The city's municipal code allows for the establishment of cannabis businesses within the light industrial zoning district, subject to a conditional use permit. Here are photos of the site in its current condition. The applicant is not proposing any modifications to the exterior of the building or to the landscaping. Other uses in the multi-tenant building include a cannabis business, restaurants, and an adult or sexually oriented business. The city's municipal code establishes location requirements for cannabis businesses, dispensaries, and distribution sites, including minimum separations from schools, residential areas, and other sensitive uses. The location of the proposed project does not violate any of these requirements. Here is the site plan and the floor plan for the proposed project. The proposed cannabis distribution and dispensary business would occupy suites A and B, which make up approximately 2,200 square feet of the 13,000 square foot building. The applicant is proposing tenant improvements to modify the interior of the two-story suite. As shown on the floor plan, the ground floor of the suite is proposed for the dispensary uses, and the second story would be the distribution uses. Based on these floor areas, the applicant would be required to provide 8 parking spaces, which can be accommodated by the existing parking lot. However, because the parking lot for the building as a whole includes a total of 55 parking spaces, the California Building Code requires the provision of 3 ADA accessible parking spaces. There are currently only 2 ADA parking spaces provided on site, so the conditions of approval will require that the applicant provide 1 additional ADA van accessible parking space. Additionally, as conditions of approval, the city is requiring that the applicant repave the driveway and a portion of the drive aisle from the property line to the first traffic island. The conditions of approval also require the applicant to pay for the installation of a streetlight along the Ramon Road frontage. Other than these site improvements, the applicant is not proposing any modifications to the exterior of the building or to the landscaping. Therefore, this item was not brought before the Architectural Review Committee. Overall, the project will comply with all applicable operational requirements for cannabis businesses as provided in chapters 5.88 and 9.018 of the city's municipal code. Based on these findings, staff recommends that the Planning Commission find that the project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to section number 15301, class number 1, which is for existing facilities, and approve conditional use permit number 17012B, subject to the conditions of approval and based on the findings contained in the staff report. That concludes my presentation. I would be happy to answer any questions. And the applicant and representative are also here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Camps. Commissioner McPhail, do you have any questions?
Yes, could you bring up the view of the building, the L-shaped building? Yeah, that would be fine, I guess. In reading the staff report, a CUP was approved in 2017. So is there an existing dispensary there now?
In this suite?
Or in that other part of the long part of the L building, is there another one in there?
Yes, so in suites G, H, and I,
yeah.
there's Green Vision, which is a conditional use permit for cannabis business, and I believe that is still pending building and planning inspections, but the CUP has been approved.
Okay. So,
Cultivation, it's a cultivation and distribution use.
and this is going to be a second permitted dispensary in the same building?
Yeah, so this one would
Nope.
be dispensary, the other one is cultivation.
Okay, all right. Because, the staff report talked about, making sure there's not an excessive concentration of dispensaries, and it looked like the requirement was purely, if there's 20 plus south of I-10, then we have an excessive concentration. There's nothing more specific than just being 20 south of I-10. It could be 20 in this building, and we'd be okay.
That's how it's defined in the city's code
Yeah.
at this time.
But what we will have in this building, as this went through, is one dispensary and one not dispensary production something or other. So it's not two of the 20 are not here, I guess is what I'm saying.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. And there's no other locational requirements other than just south of I-10, there could be 20 anywhere.
Not in terms of concentration. The other locational requirements are separation from residential uses,
Right.
youth
Yeah.
uses, things like that.
In San Diego, we had a requirement that there could only be so many per council district. So I was just wondering if there was something like that here. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Mead?
I know that it's in the conditions of approval, the air filtration system and the negative air pressure system. This is just west of Perez and Cathedral Canyon. If I recall, you can kind of see the building from that intersection. If you roll your window down at that intersection, I mean, it is a strong smell. And I know that we have an ordinance, and I'm guessing that for one reason or another, it's not succeeding in keeping the smell. So I guess I'm just, it's nothing specific about them, but I guess I'm just asking, we are enforcing that ordinance, correct?
Yes.
Because I would assume that this would just exacerbate that intersection.
We are working on this. We have sent a letter to all of the cultivators and reminded them of the city's code requirements
Okay.
for odor mitigation and control, and are actively working on it.
Great, thank you. And then I think, the only other thing I was wondering about is I didn't see anything about security. Is there a requirement for security?
I believe so, but let me check the conditions of
Okay.
approval.
Yeah, I couldn't find anything in there.
There's a security plan that is required as condition 3.19, and as well that requires approval of the Community Economic Development Department and the Police Department prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy.
Got it, thank you. I was looking for it, I couldn't find it. That's it for me.
Commissioner Lee?
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned the resurfacing of that pavement. I went to visit the site recently, and I was somewhat disturbed about the general look of the property. So the police have this metaphor about broken window syndrome, and usually when we've put when we've given a CUP for a new facility, it's improved the area. So we've improved a lot of buildings now over the last few years through cannabis business. I don't see that here. In fact, it looks like it's probably one of our worst buildings. There's a burnt-out sign for City of Dank, which was a previous tenant. another bakery sign that's burnt out. The Gentlemen's Club has a broken sign over it. The whole thing feels like, it's been vacated. So I'm glad we have something going on, and I don't know how much a new tenant should be responsible for all of that, but it seems to me that we have a bigger problem with this property. So I'm not sure if it's right that we're putting new businesses in there without the landlord actually taking care of those premises.
I think that's fair, and I might let the applicant respond to that. I will say that because they're proposing to just essentially establish a business in an existing space, there was some, I think, consideration of that in how much the conditions of approval are requesting.
Independent of this application, the property owner has a responsibility to maintain their property. And the conditions that you've raised, that is something that I can share with our code compliance staff for further investigation. Property owners have a responsibility to maintain their parking lot, to maintain the striping. If there is damaged signage within that property, that's something that we can take a look at. We can take a look at any blight conditions that may exist on the property and pursue other channels through code compliance to address those greater concerns beyond this application.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Well, everybody kind of brought up things that were on my list. But dovetailing on everybody just a little bit, I couldn't hear everything that you were just saying. So basically, in reference to Commissioner Lee's comments, we're going to refer the maintenance issues to code enforcement to follow up with the property owner.
Correct.
Okay. And I just want to state for the record so that the public knows that we don't have a distance requirement between any kind of cannabis facilities, not just like distribution and sales, but between any kind and any kind. And that's true, right?
That's correct.
And we also don't have any distance requirement between alcohol-related uses and any kind of cannabis facility. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And dovetailing on Commissioner Mead, bringing up condition 3.07, which I had in my notes, but for a different reason. So we had such trouble with condition 3.07 on the previous application. And did you talk to this applicant about condition 3.07, and then they're aware that, that has to be done?
I did raise it to them via email. We have not had a chance before this meeting to discuss it further, but I did call particular attention that this is a condition of approval.
When they come up here, we can double check with them that they're aware of condition 3.07, because we just had so much trouble with it in the last application, and I felt like we needed to just make sure that they're aware of it. And then also, in relation to the security, we don't have any requirement for a sally door or a double entrance, right?
I don't believe so.
Just to kind of add to that, there are security requirements for retailers under the California Code of Regulations as well.
But not specifically to have like a buzzer and a door and then a second
No,
door.
I believe right now it just calls for any person entering to be accompanied by somebody while they're in the premises, but not to what
Okay.
you're... Mhm.
And then, so the hours of operation, according to our code, 5.88070 is 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., right?
That's correct.
Okay, so I'd like to open the public hearing and invite the applicant to come up, and I know that we have some questions for him.
Good evening, Commissioners. Good evening.
Please state your name and city of residence.
My name is Ruben.
Yes, your name and city of residence.
Ruben Harrisunian. I live in Cathedral City, and I also live in LA.
Okay. Did you just want to ask us, did you want to make any kind of presentation, or you want us just to ask you questions?
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Feel free to ask a
Okay.
question.
I'll start. Condition 3.07, I'm not saying that you disagree with it. It's just that with the air curtain and the exhaust air filtrations, we've had other applicants that just really disagreed with that condition, and I want to make sure you're aware of it and that it is required.
Yeah, it's been in a conditional use permit. It's just to clarify it for you, dispensaries nowadays with the new regulations and a new compliance that it needs to be jarred, sealed, and packed, all the products. It's not used to be before that everybody was opening jars and selling it from a jars. Now everything changed with the new state regulations. So dispensaries are not producing so much outdoor as cultivators. The mostly smell that comes from is from cultivation facilities, not dispensaries, because everything is like sealed, child-proof, double sealed, closed in a jars, and there is no open cannabis anywhere in a facility. It's even illegal to have open cannabis in a facility by the
But you
DCC.
realize that you still have that condition that you'll need to comply with for the filters and the air curtains.
Yeah, that's...
Okay,
if
I
it's
just
in a
want to
con-
make...
No, yeah.
We want to make sure you're aware of that. Like I said, I'm not saying that you disagreed with it, it's just that other applicants had trouble with that condition, and I just want to make it clear that that's a requirement, and if you agree with
Yes.
that, then that's fine. And then, Mr. McPhail, do you have a...
I have no other questions.
Commissioner Mead?
Nothing from me.
Thank you, sir.
I just want to bring up one condition.
Can you speak into the microphone?
Yes. I want to just bring up one condition, and I will further discuss with Ms. Dominic about the building, the fixing the alley, the whole driveway, the alley that gets to our plaza, because it's mostly heavily occupied with the body shops and mechanic shops and all their cars throughout all day. And it's heavily used mostly by them, then like our small place is going to be open. If it's possible to make that partially like split between among us, or I don't know how it works, city fixes it and bills us all the tenants that are using that big alley, I think that would be a little bit more fair, because it's a big driveway that's mostly used by body shops, and there are cars parked there throughout the day. Car that's been fixed, car that's been waiting to be fixed, like it's all out throughout. So we're hardly using that big driveway that goes to our plaza.
I think we need to refer that back to staff as to, about that condition.
Through the shopping center and through all the conditional use permits that people have come in, we incrementally look at how many parking spaces they have, and we apply some improvements to the whole parking lot and drive entrance in proportion to that. Whether the applicant himself is the one responsible for it or the owner of the shopping center, that's for them to work out a business arrangement. But in our case, if we can't motivate the owner, or if the shopping center isn't kept at, an acceptable, the paving isn't kept at an acceptable condition, we're going to apply those conditions, but we can't just say to this applicant, we need the whole parking lot paved. So we use, basically the barometer for that is if they're required 8 parking spaces and an ADA space, in this case, they need to add an ADA space, and it's equivalent to about 8 parking spaces of improvement.
Yeah, adding the ADA space, I'm familiar with that conditional use, which I agree. The landlord is saying that he paved the whole plaza a year and a half ago. So or half of it, he said, he paved.
He applied a slurry seal to it, he didn't repave it.
Yeah.
So that's basically something that, it's a condition of approval that,
and I'm very sorry to interrupt.
but you could work that out with the owner of the property as long as it's...
Just the alley doesn't belong to the same owner of the property. The body shop and the mechanic shop owners, they have different properties.
Well, let
which-
me clarify, the conditions of approval, and I specifically looked at this, is on the private property of the shopping center. It is not in the public alleyway which the city owns.
Do we have any sort of diagram or anything that where we would be able to see where you're talking about? Oh, okay.
Okay, that makes it more clear for me when you show me on the map.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments from the commission, and are we ready for a motion?
We just need to open it up for a public hearing first.
Oh, what?
For a public hearing first?
Oh, okay. I opened it, I just didn't close it. Is there anybody else that would like to speak on this as part of the public hearing?
Looks like we have no one wishing to speak.
Okay, then I will close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
I move that we find that the project is exempt from California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, pursuant to section number 15301, class number 1, existing facilities, and approve conditional use permit number 17-012B, subject to the attached conditions of approval and based on the findings contained in the staff report.
I'll second.
We have a second, and we're waiting for the system.
Let the record show a motion was made by Commissioner McPhail, seconded by Commissioner Lee, to approve public item 3C. Motion carries all ayes.
Okay, thank you, and good luck with your new business. Then we'll move on to the next section on our agenda, discussion on future agenda items. We have a meeting on the 21st?
Yes.
Okay. And we will be ready. Are there any reports from the commissioners? Or any comments?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for the assistance staff has given me in getting into a glide pattern here with you guys, and looking forward to future meetings.
I'll just say that I'm sorry that I won't be with you at the next meeting on the 21st. Unfortunately, I'm going to be in Prague at the time on vacation. Sorry.
I don't know how we'll muddle through, but we'll try.
So there will only be 3 of us.
There'll only be 3 of us, so if one of us can't make it, then there's no meeting.
Just a question for staff, do we know when the deadline is for filling the opening? When city council would be voting on that?
The vacancy, we last reported to the council we were hoping that they would fill it in August. Have you heard an update?
I don't have an update, but we are moving as quickly as we can to fill it.
Okay, just curious.
Well, I think this tonight showed that we have a great group that looks at things very comprehensively and sometimes looks at the same things and sometimes looks at different things. And I think that's great. So I look forward to working with everybody, and it's a good group of people, and I look forward to us getting our fifth person in September. If there's no more commissioner comments, are there any comments from the city attorney?
No comments, thank you.
Okay. And any staff comments?
No comments this evening.
Then at 8:57, we will adjourn our meeting. Thank you, everybody.